Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is the seventh Commune podcast on Metroid Prime Federation Force. I am Daniel, and once again, I am joined by my two teammates on the Galactic Federation Force. They are Greg. Greg, say hello.
Hello.
That was very stylish. Uh, very stylized hello. Sounds like it might be one of the voiceovers in the game. If you, change the tempo. Um, and Adrian, please say hello.
Hello.
Yeah, that was cool. That was cool. Not really my responsibility to grade your hellos, is it? Um, so, uh, so in this podcast, we will be talking about mods and loadouts and the effect that they have on the core shooting and moving gameplay that we had discussed back in the first podcast. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. Mods and loadouts. Let's start with loadouts. I've already forgotten who I was going to ask to say which one, but Greg, I'm sure you'll happily explain loadouts to us, right?
Yeah. So before each mission, you can choose certain items to bring into the mission, and there's a preset number of each item that you can bring, and there'll be things they can use offensively, like missiles, or support items, like shields, or like kind of miscellaneous items, like decoys that are useful but not really offensive or support.
I think they're called auxiliary items, aren't they? Like or AUX, AUX.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
No problem. So there's a fixed amount that they give you for any mission, but even beyond that, you can only take as many as your weight limit allows. So you can't just bring 1,000 missiles and then blow up everything.
There is a mod chip that can increase your inventory slots
Yeah,
for your
there is.
loadouts. Hmm. And Adrian, what about mods? What are mods?
So mods are these sort of passive abilities or modifications that you can add to your character to give various, buffs and amplifications of the auxiliary weapons you carry or to your base character stats, such as, taking less damage or doing more damage. You can also think of it like perks in other RPGs. They're these passive abilities that amplify you or your auxiliary weapons in some way. When you start the game, you can only equip one mod chip at a time, but as you progress through the campaign, you can equip up to 3. Because there's a capacity of only 3 mod chips, it makes it so that you can buff yourself up, but never too much. You have to play to the buffs that you apply to yourself.
You have to specialize, and it helps if you can like aim all of your mods towards one thing rather than try to spread out and do a bunch of stuff kind of poorly.
Yeah,
I guess in this sense, mods and loadouts sort of fit each other like two jigsaw pieces, in the sense of if you equip certain mods, that will augment certain items in your loadout, then you want to take those items with you into the mission. So if you have like an extended burn period on the fire beam, then you want to take fire beams in with your loadout when you go into the mission. So in that way, the two fit together and support different playstyles and approaches.
right.
I guess one way I've sort of characterized, at least in my mind, the relationship between mods and loadouts and the core sort of moving and shooting gameplay is that the moving and shooting is the core. It's the main part of the game, and has strong, spatial time dynamics, all of that goodness. And then you've got this sort of outer layer, which is the mods and loadouts and customization sort of options.
Mhm.
And mods and loadouts, they affect the player's viable options within the game, and therefore they facilitate different they facilitate access to different types of gameplay and game styles, and they sort of in their own way create different way of being and interacting within the game, and they have their own sense of variation. So the other thing that I wanted to say as well, to tie the two together, is that mods and loadouts are equipped before you go into a mission, so you can't actually change your mods and loadouts while you're out on the battlefield. You can find like items which contribute, which go into your inventory, or what you might think of as the loadout, in like boxes and that scattered throughout on the missions, and they're a way to sort of replenish your stock. But mods and loadouts are something that you do before the mission. It's kind of like like some strategy games, and like a game like Final Fantasy Tactics, where before you go into a mission, you will choose your party members and their equipment and whatnot. Same sort of deal here.
Yeah. I think the mods and the loadouts also introduce a form of scalable difficulty for players. You can choose to go bare minimum, Mega Man Buster only, or you can choose just a couple of missiles to keep with you, or you can choose, sorts of defense and offense buffs to make the game, much easier for yourself.
In the Metroid context, it kind of feels like the Federation troopers have access to the same upgrades as Samus, only they kind of have to hack it into their suit, right? Instead of getting these really fancy Chozo style upgrades that are just permanent.
Yeah.
And I mean, you get missiles. Samus gets missiles.
Yeah. I mean, missiles were always, well, even when you unlock missiles, they were always still things that she had to pick up. It's not like a permanent upgrade, like a space jump or something,
Yeah.
or a speed booster.
So I guess my next question then is, what measures are put in place to encourage players to use a different range of mods and loadouts?
Well, just in the first mission alone, I believe the sergeant actually tells you, hey, if you're going to an ice planet, you might want to bring on some fire weapons or something like that. So just in the tutorial itself, they give you advice on, hey, try things out. And even then, because you're always forced into that loadout screen before you start every mission, naturally some players are going to be like, oh, let's look at what we got here before I just, keep moving on with the game. And so that's one way that players are always emphasized to pick something, is because they're always forced into that screen before they start a mission. And even then, the gameplay challenges them on their own can challenge players and encourage them to want to, maybe dial the challenge back and maybe pick up more missiles, or try out that shock shot that they kind of ignored. Things like that. And even then, just standard gameplay, when you're blowing up crates, you end up picking some anyways, so that in itself can get you to try out some weapons, and then maybe that can get you to pick out a mod that you collect at the end of every stage that can amplify those auxiliary weapons that you picked up.
I think as well, there's also on the fact that as a group of players, we each so we've I mean, we will choose our own mods. We can get into the selection of that later, but for loadouts, we choose our loadouts from a collective pool.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this sort of natural push and pull where between the three of us, we'd have to decide who was going to take what, or I guess undecide or not decide. If someone got in first and took all the missiles or something like this. But
Yeah.
there is also that that sort of dynamic force of players and their own preferences, and the fact that any one of us at any one point may want to choose a particular item, or to focus on a certain play style, and so that would naturally affect the options of the others when they go and choose their loadout.
And naturally, because mods can have impact on what your loadout does, if someone has a particular mod that impacts a particular item, like if Daniel has a thing that makes healing capsules stronger, then we might be more likely to give him all of the healing capsules.
And I guess with mods as well, your use. There's also the decay of mods, or the fact that mods break over time. Greg, can you talk a bit about how this works and how it sort of encourages players to change their play styles?
There are certain mods that never break. They're like unlockables, like the hyper mode mod from Blast Ball. But aside from that, the large majority of the mods you find are going to be in the world, and um, they don't decay so much as when you die, it's a seemingly random chance that a mod will break. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's all there is to it. Um, and it's kind of frustrating because if you're on a hard mission and you have a good mod, if you have a good set of mods for that mission, then it can mean when you fail the mission, it gets that much harder.
That's especially true with some of the plus 20% damage mods as well. Like they are so good, and they really contribute to your not only your effectiveness as a player who can damage the enemies, but also just to rack up points. Like if you've got like some of these buffs, instead of taking 200, well, instead of getting say 200 points on a full charge shot to the head. Sorry, instead of getting 100 points for a charge shot to the head on a space bar, you can get like 240 even at some point. So those mods are just awesome, and you really want to keep them.
Mm-hmm.
It got to the point where I would die pretty regularly in both campaigns, and I hated having to. I just hated my strategic options changing, so I just said screw it and unequipped all my mods.
Yeah, that's where yeah. So while I got you to unequip or not bother with mods anymore, you still picked out auxiliary weapons.
Yeah, definitely, but those are the same each, like, you boot up the mission, there's 10 missiles. You can
Yeah,
rely on that being there.
yeah,
I think to really make sense of the role that mods and loadouts play within the core gameplay, I think we really need to kind of focus on some of our own examples of how we use mods and loadouts to create those different play styles. So we've each got a couple of examples that we will share, and I think this will just paint a picture of that of some of the things that we've been talking about so far. And then once we've got that in place, we can then sort of talk a bit more about the other functions of mods and loadouts. So, Adrian, do you want to run through a couple of examples of your mods and loadouts and how and where you use them in gameplay?
yeah. So right off the bat, one mod that I used, especially for one mission in particular, was the armor decoy. Because in hard mode, the ice titans become much more deadly, but they dish out more damage, which means the decoy wouldn't last as long. So they would only stay in the cage with the decoy for so long. So that mod right there was very helpful for at least to survive 2 or 3 hits instead of just one when putting it in the cage for the ice titan to run after. So the armor decoy mod, especially armor decoy 3, was one that I chose. Auto revive was another big one for me. I'm sort of a hybrid between warrior and support, where I would always take super missiles, and naturally I always want to get back into the action quick as possible. So that's when, if I have an auto revive mod, that helps a lot, especially considering those are one-use mods only. So I don't bother saving them. I just use them as I get them. And another mod that I would use, because again, playing to the warrior class, I believe it's called armor plating, which gives you a defense boost of 10 to 20 to actually it's called reinforced plating, and it goes from 20 to 30 to 50% of reducing damage. Naturally, those I enjoyed a lot, so that I could take more damage while still staying in the heat of action. And the fourth one, and this goes to the support again, where it was the mod that expanded the amount of things you could carry. And those I found helpful because, specifically talking about auxiliary weapons or ammo, healing capsules were some of the most important, and I couldn't revive on auto-revive all the time. And naturally, one of the suckiest things to happen is when your capacity's full, you break some crates, and then you find like 3 healing capsules, and you can't pick any of them up, so you have to go off and waste some fire shots or something. So that's why I found myself attached to the mod that expands your capacity, so that if I'm going through a level, I can still pick something up, especially a healing capsule. So those are the mods that I found myself leaning to the most.
And what about you, Greg? What were some of your combinations?
I liked the mods that would amplify what your special or the elemental weapons would do. I remember in particular the shock shot would help out on certain bosses. Although one one particularly amusing example, I think we mentioned that on mainframe the shock shot will spread from one box to the next, but also on the core phase, mainframe shoots out these lasers, and it's basically a jump rope section where you have to jump over and under some rotating lasers. And if you use the shock shot, you can paralyze the boss on that segment. Only it throws everyone's timing off because the boss's cycle is suddenly interrupted, and then your timing for jumping over the laser when it comes around is completely thrown off at that point. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I remember that. Was yeah.
And
The timing challenge of the jump rope, especially when there's the upper and lower lasers, is like really is quite complex, and so when you'd like pause the timing, it'd totally like throw us off.
Yeah.
But there's extensions on all of the elemental effects for freezing and for how long an enemy stays burned. And like we mentioned on Rockor, using that kind of thing on a boss can be very helpful to keep openings just that much longer.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll share mine. I've got 2, and I think we've talked about these already over the course of the last few podcasts. So on the first one is similar to your last example, Greg, with the electricity beam or the shock beam. So I would often use the freeze beam or the slow beam to prolong the time in which a boss's weak point would be open. And so it was quite helpful in, what was the boss with the giant beetle?
Rocker
what mission
beetle.
was that now?
Oh, it's 12.
12, okay, yeah. So I would use it in that boss, and with a lot of bosses, I would use the freeze beam or slow beam just to prolong that time and to sort of ensure that we could meet the time requirements for the extra metal for the bosses. I'd also use the freeze beam and the slow beam to take pot shots at, to freeze space pirates, have enough time to charge my charge shot, and then land a headshot, which would also have the extra bonus points of breaking the frozen enemy as well, which was great. And I think on the freeze beam also is useful in the same way for creating like time and space within some of those more complicated challenges where there's like a lot of enemies all in at once. So yeah, we've talked about a few examples of that before. The other example of mods and loadouts would be using the shield stabilizer and the shield. So the shield stabilizer increases the duration that you can have a shield active. and so I would use this quite a lot, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used it in. I've got a few examples here. I used it in the Infestation. That's the retrieval mission where you have to go in and claim the Metroid eggs, and in order to get the 3 medals, all players have to take an egg with them. And what that would mean is that as we were leaving the planet and we're moving through those last few rooms, we were all holding these eggs, which meant that none of us could shoot. And so by shielding one of us and by then getting the 3 of us under huddle up, we were then able to just have a mad dash straight to the finish, and we wouldn't have to worry about some of the space pirates, which
Yeah.
was really good because in the second to last room, I think in Infestation, or I guess the second room, depending on your perspective. The way it's set up is that the space pirates are like they're sort of in the back corner, and so you can't really get a visual on them if you're moving straight ahead. And so using the shield and the stabilizer allowed us to just keep moving ahead and to not have to stop, drop the eggs, turn around, find the space pirates, shoot the space pirates, yada yada yada.
Hmm.
Yeah, that mission was really intense, wasn't it?
Yeah. It just reminded me that there was 2 other mods that I forgot to bring up. One was the Supercharger, which does extra 20, 30, 50% damage, which is incredibly useful for going for the high score. So not only would, if you get a fully charged headshot, that's where you get, up to like 240 points, like you brought up earlier. So that was extremely useful. The other was, as we progressed through the game, I started using mines a lot more. So I leaned towards using the blast radius mod, where the explosions will deal full damage in the entire area instead of, the center dealing 100 and then the outer areas doing like 50. As well as using the high yield mod, where, the proximity bombs do 20, 30, 50% more damage. Especially useful for Black Hole and High Tower, and this mission, the one you brought up with the Metroids, I would also use it there too, where I would stand behind the shield. I would charge up the distance to fire a mine, because the radius was so large you could take out several of them at once.
Yeah, so you can see by all the examples that we've gone through that that mods and loadouts really, as I was saying, they change your viable options and they change the potential play styles that you can bring into a game. Although I know I've kind of preempted this question, but I'd still like to put it forward to see if you guys have some points to elaborate on. But given this, what effect do the loadouts and mods have on the core shooting and moving gameplay?
So the effect that the loadouts have on the core shooting gameplay can be divided into 3 categories. Offense, defense, support. All of them help to make challenges easier, and each in their own unique way. So, for example, mines are very good for crowd control, protecting your back, destroying a large amount of enemies at once. Because Federation Force deals with enemies that can often come up close to you, even when they're just trying to shoot you. That's when mines were particularly effective. In fact, another mission where that happens is the end of mission 6, after the stealth section, when we all get back into our mechs and we're all confined to a tiny area like that. Mines are incredibly useful because they do not damage other players, so you can just throw them around wherever you want and kill everyone. So, in general, they work to make the game easier for yourself when you find yourself in a tight spot, and giving yourself extra advantages or extra options that you normally wouldn't have if you were playing, Buster only. What is Samus's gun called? I keep saying Buster only, but that's not what it's called.
I think it's just
The power beam?
generally called the charge beam. Oh, yeah, power beam.
Okay,
actually.
yeah.
That'd be
So
right.
instead of doing, a power beam only run, you get more options because, now I can throw mines, now I can shoot missiles, now I can put up a shield and hide in it and shoot all the enemies that are surrounding me. now I can fire a super missile. Things like that. Mods are an even further scale to make the game easier for you by giving you extra damage. So if you're fighting a bruiser, that extra 30 to 50% can help you with taking them out faster, as well as things like extra capacity. They also fall into the same three categories of mods, helping you in offense, defense, and support.
I think it's worth noting, though, that it, loadout is a difference in character, whereas mods are a difference in extent, right? Where, um, you know, a missile might help you do more damage, and the split missile mod doesn't, um, only. Hmm. A missile has unique behavior of how it flies through the air and how it can lock onto enemies, and the split missile mod does not change the missile's behavior so much as just how much damage and the width of the spread it does.
Right, the split warhead, splits the missile. Some of them, I believe, do change it. I know there is one for the fire shot that actually gives it 2 extra fireballs and increases the spread. I guess the one thing to note about mods is that they're all buffs. You don't have anything, like in some other games where you gain an advantage but also gain some other disadvantage at the same time. It's like, no, they only help you do better. They don't help you do worse. There's no disadvantage that you have to work around.
Mm.
I guess one other point that I forgot to make earlier, when we were talking about, mods breaking, is that while they also work to scale difficulty, and if your mods break, it can actually make the game harder. I do also think that they can get you to experiment with other mods, and as a consequence, other auxiliary weapons. So it's another way to get you to try out new things if you're still interested in making the game easier for yourself. At the same time, it could also get you to buckle down and learn how to play the game better, work to use that gyro aiming more, and get those charge shots in.
Actually, just to extend off of what you were saying, Adrian, or maybe to paraphrase it somewhat, I think that the way that mods and loadouts line up and the way that they can be used as a way to cover your own weaknesses as a player, that's in that way they, by filling in your mistakes or your areas of weakness, it's through that function that they encourage players to experiment with different aspects of the game system, and even just being like discrete sort of augments in and of themselves. Mods will draw your attention to elements of the game system that you otherwise might not have noticed as well. And a good example of that is um, how the mods that would increase your damage, at least for me, they made me more conscious of the way that points are assigned based on if you've shot if you made a shot at the body or if you made a shot at a particular weak point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So great. So if you can first just explain how we actually get mods, and then we can talk about the different factors at play.
So most of the mods you'll come across in the game world itself. Um, Usually you have to find a secret passage or it'll be locked away behind some wall. I think the first mod you can find in the game is behind a wall that you have to melt using the flame shot. Um, so you find those and you pick them up, and they don't actually go to whoever picks them up. They go into like a shared pool, and at the end of the mission, you take turns picking out what mods you want, and the order of choosing is based on whoever has the most points. So it'll cycle through the person with the most points, then the second person, then the third person. And in our case, we only had 3 people playing, so it would go back around to the first person again.
Mm-hmm.
the first person is quite an advantage because particularly if there's fewer players, they're more likely to get more than one mod. So it's not just that first dibs. It's also that option to get a second mod.
Yeah.
And the way that the mods are doled out according to points also ties into a theme that we see in a lot of multiplayer Nintendo games, where it's cooperative, but it's also competitive at the same time. And this is where we see the competitive aspect come out. Although, in saying that, I feel like I feel like the three of us were pretty gracious. Um, like Adrian, like you would like leave mods and.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like at least in normal mode, I feel like Adrian, you like got heaps of like great mods. You generally scored quite well, and then later on, you kind of like realize, oh yeah, I don't, I'll be nice and I'll let Greg and Daniel take some, and then
Yeah.
later on, Greg was like, oh yeah, stuff mods, I don't need mods. So I was just I was just taking whatever I wanted by the end.
Yeah. But now, just to jump onto that point you were making about the score, even when not fighting for mods, well, for fighting for mods, it especially encourages players to, do better. Not just let the rest of their team, do most of the legwork for them, actually be an active participant if you want to get your hands on some of those mods. But even just score alone, like even if I wasn't taking the mods anymore, I still wanted the best score.
Yeah. So what? So you have the podium finish? Is that it?
Yep,
It's a
that's
little
right.
interesting in that sense then that collecting mods goes against score in that for one, each mission has a par time, and if you meet the par time, then you get a whole bunch of points. So usually to find that, you want the shortest time, which means not taking those side passages where you pick up mods and little doodads.
Hmm.
But there's also the fact that while you're off in that side passage, the other players can be off shooting guys and actually getting like hundreds of points while you're collecting 5 points off a crate.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's always pros and cons.
yeah. There's
I think that's again because the game is tied to those strong core dynamics that trade-offs like this, where where mods are separate, hidden collectibles that are separate from the action. That exploration has a natural tension through just through to this just because of the simple nature of space.
mhm. One thing that I wanted to note about the mods is that you can still see in other games whenever you use, something like a missile, it would make the challenge easier. But if you were going for a score run, it's still you would actually have to sort of throw it away and use, whatever gives you the most, points. But with Federation Force, I find that you can actually still stick to your playstyle. You can still stick to those auxiliary weapons that you're fond of if you equip the mod that gives them those damage boosts. So if you particularly like the fire shot or the shock shot or the freeze shot, you can still keep those weapons and do fairly well for getting a high score run as long as you equip the mod that gives them those damage boosts. Otherwise, on their own, naturally the thing that gives you the most points is a fully charged shot to the head or to a weak point. But thanks to mods, you can actually make the high score challenges easier by putting those mods and keeping your missiles and auxiliary weapons.
Yeah, it sort of provides a sort of, as you were saying before, Adrian, with the scalable difficulty, it provides like a different avenue to engage in the game. Like you might not be really good at at shooting and aiming, but if you have but if you but you can make up for that in different ways due to mods and loadouts. Like with the freeze shot example I mentioned before about freezing a pirate and then getting a charge shot up and then landing the headshot so as to get your extra points. That's a way for people who may not be as good at aiming with a gyro to still participate in charge shotting to the head.
Yeah. A nice way to paraphrase it is that it allows players who do want to gauge with those high score runs, but without them having to be forced to throw away some of those auxiliary weapons that they might have gotten attached to.
How does the role creation that's made available through mods and loadouts differ from the sort of the character-based role systems in other first-person shooting games? And I guess as counter examples, I'm thinking like Team Fortress 2 and games like that.
Ah, well, besides the fact that Team Fortress 2 is, competitive multiplayer, in that game those characters are more firmly set in their roles as far as, movement speeds, melee damage, and what guns they even carry. Whereas Federation Force, everyone starts off, with the same base stats, and then they modify themselves from there. So you can pick any auxiliary weapon you want. It's not tied to a class. There are no classes in Federation Force. Your class, so to speak, is defined by what auxiliary weapons you pick and what mods you pick to go with it. So it's more freeform.
Like build your own class.
Yeah.
Like build your own class out of the tools that we've given you, sort of thing.
Yeah. I can't actually think of many first-person shooters that really let you do that.
So I guess if we've got these tools that we can use to create our own playstyles and to build our own role, then I guess to sort of abstract out some of those examples that we gave, what kind of role did we create for ourselves within the campaign? And did that role change over time?
For me, I was definitely more of a sort of warrior role. That is, if I saw a super missile, I knew I always wanted it to happen because super missiles were so heavy and took up so much weight. I naturally leaned towards using the mod chip that extended your capacity, as well as for the sake of using healing, so I wouldn't die and have to wait for someone else to pick me back up. I could just heal myself and get right back into the action. Over time, though, because in hard mode, super missiles are much more rare, that eventually changed to me using proximity mines more. As well as the armored decoy. I used that quite a bit. So that's where, and because both of those are less direct ways of combating it, well, the proximity bomb does deal direct damage, the decoy less though. So that's why I consider myself more of a hybrid between, warrior and support.
I remember there was like one point in the campaign where I just so happened to strike it lucky and get a super missile out of one of the boxes. And my first thought was, I've never used one of these before. Like I think we've been playing for about 10 hours, 15 hours or something
Yeah.
at that point, and you guys like just hogged them, and I'd like never taken a super missile, and then I like wasted it like on a simple enemy or something.
That's funny.
Um,
I'm pretty sure it does 1,000 damage though, so it's not even much of a waste as far as score goes.
yeah, but I think I just use it on like an ice hopper or something. Yeah. What about you, Greg? What role do you think you played, and how'd you get there?
I don't really think I had too much of a role per se. I would use things that were very easy to use, like either the missiles or the elemental weapons. I wouldn't bother with anything like a slow beam or a decoy.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that in my assessment.
Or the scan bolt even. And I think typically it was better to leave the health equipment to you um, simply because you had the right mods for them. So I just went for the stuff that was the easiest to use.
Yeah, you two would always take all the missiles, and I never use missiles at all, so
Actually, I would generally lean away from missiles. I would keep them around, like, for desperate measures, but because they, one, didn't give you that much for points compared to a power charge shot to the head, and two, they also just generally made the game easier, and I'm like, no, I want this. I'm doing it my way. I want to get fully charged shots to the head. Because of that self-imposed challenge, I naturally leaned away towards missiles unless I was in a dire situation.
So for me, I think, well, I've said a few examples so far, but I quite liked to be the shielder and the healer. And I remember when we were starting off, I thought to myself, I want to be the healer role because at least in that case, like in a way you kind of wield the power, if that makes sense. Like, if someone else is down, I can be like, oh no, sorry, I'm busy over here, and just like totally forget about um, about how my teammates are going. Um, I do like the shield, and I like how the shield is really versatile in that you can actually attach it to things, and so I gravitated towards using the shield, and I really, really, really love I can't remember what it's called now, but there's the mod that will allow you to for the shield to heal you at the same time. And geez, like I think I got that mod like twice, and that was like the best mod. Anyway, so I would shield and sort of defend and be the protector of the group. In contrast to Adrian's warrior role. And I think that I use the ice beam and the slow beam in a similar way, to sort of slow the speed of slow the speed of some of those more intense confrontations, as a way, like in a collective sense, so that like if I noticed that you guys were finding it hard, and that as a group through our communication that we were all sort of on the ropes, I would start to use, like, I would just ice, just to just to cool things off. Mind the pun. But I think as well, Greg, I think that you and I would sometimes sort of trade roles with some of the auxiliary weapons, like the fire and the shock beam.
Mm.
Yeah. To sort of add to what I missed, I forgot about the scan bolt and the slow beam. Scan bolt, I used it because it has this interesting effect where when you fire it on an enemy, it shows their weak point, but it also gives you power shot homing. So you can fire, a fully charged shot, and it'll have slight homing on the scanned enemy. The other was I did actually end up using slow beams a lot more, especially for the mission with the Metroids. Slow those bastards down a little.
It's interesting, actually. Your example of the scan vault, it kind of reminds me that a number of these of the loadout items, they have like more than one distinct property. So like the fire beam will cause a burn, so it'll cause some damage over time, only about 5 HP or something. But it will also cause combustion as well, which makes the enemies explode.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a very, very, very slight radio effect. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, there's actually a mod called Combustion where if enemies are burned,
that's it.
They will explode and take out even more enemies alongside them. For missions like Black Hole, or pretty much a lot of encounters with space pirates, that's extremely useful because they often tend to be clumped together.
Perhaps then it's not the fact that the loadouts per se have more than one property, although perhaps they are quite flexible in and of themselves. But rather, it's more a case of the mods adding more nuance and properties to the loadouts. Well, and that's what they're for, aren't they? For augmenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like when you try and say something really profound, but it's also very obvious. Cool. So I think that pretty much wraps up our conversation, guys. did you guys have any final thoughts you wanted to share?
Because of a lot of what we covered in the first podcast about Federation Force and how combat in it is different compared to other FPSs, that's actually what allows, these loadouts and mods to be possible and make sense. They wouldn't make as much sense in other shooters. Like, you couldn't stick this in Call of Duty and have it make sense. Like, why the hell would I need to be shooting fireballs? Or why the hell would I need, proximity bombs when everybody's ducking under cover and never trying to get close to your face? They wouldn't have the same utility. So it also speaks to the core and the way that Federation Force is designed.
Yeah, with that slower movement and shooting speed, there's more time for them to add more detail and nuance and sort of richness to the moving and shooting. Whereas what you see with the more fast-paced FPS games is that they focus on things like wall climbing, and they really have to. It seems like quite a challenge, for designers to mine that design space because of that fast game speed. Limits the window of potential interactivity.
Yeah.
So that'll wrap us up for this podcast, and in the next podcast we shall discuss Metroid Prime Blast Ball, which is a sort of like a side sports game that accompanies Federation Force's main single player and cooperative multiplayer campaign. So look forward to that, and I suspect, in fact I'm quite sure, that the next podcast will be our last, and we will be answering a very, very important question, fellas, which is, what is better, the original Prime games or Metroid Prime Federation Force? Stay tuned.
It's gonna be.
Yeah, I've done it now.
Okay, you're gonna start a petition to have us cancelled.
Yeah, sadness.
It is weird that members of a commune are in a Federation Force.
What's a commune again?
It's like when you decide to... Well, okay. Basically, in the 19th century, there was this idea that you could get away from society and kind of build your own mini-society on a farm. And that's what that is, like a society away from society.
Ah, okay. Group of people living together and sharing possessions and responsibilities. Maybe that isn't surprising that a commune is a Federation Force. Whatever, I'm just ruining your joke.